Right, we will start. So good evening and welcome to the third of the 7 lessons on Introducing Buddhism, hosted by the Buddhist Society. So welcome back if you've been to the other classes, and if this is the first one, let's hope it makes sense to you, and if not, go back and have a look at the previous lessons. So we are going to start as we did last week, and we are going to settle ourselves into this new situation that we are in. So we have been doing something else, and now we have zoomed in and we're listening to a class. So it's a new activity, it's a new situation, and one could say it's a rebirth. You've been reborn now into doing something different. So we are going to ground ourselves first. And as last week, think about your posture. Are you going to be comfortable to be listening for about an hour? And feel the weight of your body. So that's a physical sensation. It's not a talking about it. Actually, physically feel the weight of the body. Feel your bottom on the chair. Feel the pressure of your feet on the floor. Those are physical sensations, tactile sensations that are coming into consciousness, into your awareness. They were there before. The feet on the floor, the bottom on the seat, that tactile sensation was there before, but I've brought your attention to it. Again, keeping with the body, maybe the sensation of clothes on the skin, hands maybe resting on your lap, or there'll be some tactile sensation. Feel the sensation, feel that physicality. And then take a few breaths. Feel the physical sensation of breathing. So the chest rises, the abdomen rises, and breathe out. When you breathe out, you get that lowering. Take a couple of deep breaths to get that sensation of the breath. And take that breath right down. When you're breathing out, take it right down into the body. And just do a few breaths. Okay. When you're doing that, you may realize that the chatter that's always going on, the attention's been taken away from that chatter. It will have reduced that chatter, that mental chatter. Okay, so I am now, as before, going to share the screen with you. And as usual, if you want to ask a question, you can either put it in the chat to the Buddhist Society. So Lavinia, who's normally with us, isn't with us tonight, but somebody for the Buddhist Society will read out those questions. Or if you want to raise a real hand or a Zoom hand, and you will be unmuted to ask your question. Okay, so let's share my screen. So as the last 2 weeks, you were asked to do, apart from if you get an opportunity to think about what we've been talking about, maybe finding information from a different resource and having a look at what we did last week. If you have time to do that in the week, that would be extremely helpful. However, most importantly, I want everybody to be doing the sitting in the chair. And we're going to carry that on through the duration of the course. So last week, I asked you to decide when. So you're choosing a time of the day, and you're also choosing the length of time. And I suggested for now between 10 and 15 minutes. And we're sitting in a chair and we've got no distractions. And we are looking what was coming into the awareness. Without coming out of the slide, I'll have to see if I can have a quick show of hands. Anybody doing this? Can I see anybody? Oh, 1 or 2. 1 or 2. Okay. Let's go back again. Good, good. I'm glad some people are having a go at this. There is a purpose. And it's interesting, you know, if you haven't done it, to think about why not. Is it because you're thinking, don't know why I'm doing it? Or you don't quite know what to do because I've not explained it to you properly. So it's interesting to look at maybe why you haven't. If you did, because this is the second week that we've done it, have you noticed anything else? Do you find it easier, more relaxing, or actually, because this is quite common, now you've done it the first time, you're beginning to get a bit irritable with it. So that'd be interesting to look at as the course goes on. And what came into awareness? So you're sitting there without anything to do, but your eyes are open, your ears are open. So what is it? Did you notice anything that made a thought arise? Maybe you sat there and suddenly thought, I need to do some tidying up or some dusting. And maybe that made you have a bit of an unpleasant feeling. Or there was something in your view. Maybe you were looking out of a window, or maybe you've got some nice flowers. I don't know. But was there something that you actually enjoyed looking at? But I don't want lots of chatting, mental chatter about things. We're cultivating awareness. So I will be asking you again at the end to do that, because we're building up, in actual fact, to looking at why meditation is an important part of a Buddhist practice. And some of you may already meditate. However, we're starting off as though we're brand new, and we're looking at the reasons why we are doing these things. So the activity is important to do, but obviously you're all adults, and you know, some of you will and some of you won't. But have a think, why not? What is the resistance? Okay, so here we are on the third lesson, and we're looking at the Four Noble Truths. And we have been mentioning the Four Noble Truths right from the beginning, I think, certainly last week. So you now hopefully are familiar with them, but we're going to be looking at them in greater depth this evening. However, I'm going to start off with telling you a sutra or sutta. So that's Pali or Sanskrit. And it's the Simpasa Sutra. And I'm saying that in case anybody wants to look these things up. Last week I said Access to Insight was a nice, easy place to look at the original Buddhist teachings, albeit translated into English. The Buddha is in a forest and he's teaching to a group of monks, bhikkhus. and he picks up a handful of leaves and he says, "What do you think, monks? Which are more numerous, the few leaves in my hand or overhead in the forest?" And a bhikkhu replied, "The leaves in the hand of the Blessed One are few in number, Lord. Those overhead in the forest are far more numerous." "That is so," said the Buddha. And then he went on to say, "Those things that I have known with direct knowledge I have not taught are far more numerous than what I have taught." In other words, he's saying he knows an awful lot of things that he's not told them. The difference being between a few leaves in his hand and those in the forest overhead. Why haven't I taught them? Because they are not connected with the goal and do not lead to calm, to self-awakening. That is why I have not taught them. And what have I taught? This is stress. This is the origination of stress. This is the cessation of stress. This is the path of practice leading to the cessation of stress. This is what I have taught and why I have taught those things, because they are connected with the goal. So in other words, he's saying that on his awakening, he realized lots of things, but he's not telling you what they are. And in actual fact, I have no idea what they were. He never said what it was he knew. But he only taught what was connected to helping us with our stress. He wasn't interested in telling us anything else. He said it's not important. And that is something to bear in mind all the time. We've said something similar before. He wasn't interested in discussing unnecessary metaphysical questions. He considered them just a wilderness of questions. And on another occasion, a bhikkhu, and I don't know if I'm saying this correctly, but Malunkaya Putta, meditating, got up from his afternoon meditation and went to the Buddha, saying to him, and obviously I'm paraphrasing, "While I was meditating this afternoon, it suddenly occurred to me that you haven't answered lots of questions, lots of problems that you've not answered. And actually, I'm quite displeased about this. And I've decided that I want to say to you, either tell us the answers to these questions, or at least say you don't know. But don't just ignore them, just don't put them to one side." And then he went on to ask the Buddha 10 questions. And they were questions like, he said, "If you don't answer them, I'm leaving. I don't want to be in your order of monks anymore if you will not answer or say you do not know the answer to these questions." And then he went on to ask him 10 questions. And it was things like, is the universe eternal or not eternal? Is it finite or not finite? What happens to you after you've died? Is the body and the soul the same thing, or are they different? Or are they not different or not the same thing? And so on. Those questions are still the kind of questions we ask today. And this is nearly 3,000 years ago. And the Buddha said to the bhikkhu, "Did I say to you I would give you the answer to those questions if you came and followed me?" "No," said the bhikkhu. He said, "Did you ask me about those questions before you came and said you would only come if I answered them?" And the bhikkhu said, no. And the Buddha said, well, who's the foolish one here then? And he refused to answer those questions because he said, they're of no help whatsoever. He didn't say he didn't know. He just said, it's of no use to you knowing the answers to those questions. And that is just worth pondering on occasions, because let's have a look at the parable of the poisoned arrow. This is a very famous parable. And a man is shot with a poisoned arrow, and the arrow needs to be removed immediately, because all the time that arrow is in the man's body, the poison is going into his bloodstream and very quickly is going to kill him. But the man refuses to have the arrow removed from his body until certain questions have been answered. And the kind of questions he wanted answering was, who shot the arrow? Does it matter? Which tribe did he belong to? From which tree was the arrow shaft made? Which bird did the feathers come from? What's the poison that's been put on the tip of the arrow? And until he's got all those answers to all those questions, he refuses to have it removed and dies from the poison from the arrow. Why would he do that? Why do that? Well, do we not do things like that? Do we not prevaricate over things? Maybe we have toothache and we think, let's just wait a few days, maybe it'll go away. Do I need to go to the dentist? I don't like the dentist. Or maybe we've got a difficult email that we have to write, or just doing something we don't want to do. And we can think of all reasons why not and distract ourselves with things. The psychologist Carl Jung said that it was like hearing a noise in the basement and going upstairs to see what the problem was. But coming back to the Buddha's teachings, the Buddha is very clear what the problem for all of us humans, what the problem is. And he's very clear about how to go about solving that problem. And the instructions that you get are also very clear. And we're being asked to follow that and not just make it all muddy the water with lots of unnecessary questions. The questions need to be directly to do with what we are talking about and need to answer something that is stopping you being able to do what the instructions are. So having said that, let's get on with a little bit more what the Buddha is telling us. So as a recap, the Buddha said, everything, all things, all phenomena that is experienced has these three signs. So whether it's a physical object, or it's a thought, or an opinion, an emotion, everything, all phenomena is impermanent. Nothing lasts, nothing at all. And that is disconcerting for us, or can be. It can make us feel insecure. It causes us dukkha. It makes things unsatisfactory at the least. Why do things change? Because everything is made up of previous causes and conditions. Nothing is solid of itself. And then, if you remember, to help us to see this within ourselves, the Buddha told us about the 5 skandhas, or aggregates, or heaps. And going back to last week, this is a system of physical and psychological parts that make up a human being. And the analogy was the parts of a chariot. And I used a car because I'm more familiar with them than a chariot. And all the different parts come together to make a whole that functions when all the parts are together. So we had the physical body, then we had the sensation or vajrayana that can actually be felt in the body when you see or hear or something you or touch something or taste something that you don't like. Perception, if you remember, that's labeling and includes memory. It's also an idea, maybe, an opinion. Then we have the sankharas, that's the fabrication, the mental configurations, all the thoughts that come from these things. And finally, consciousness. So those were the 5 skandhas. And you might feel doing a lot of repetition here, but actually it's important to do that so that every time you hear something a little bit differently and it goes a little bit deeper in. So we're just going to go back to that in a moment. So we saw this last week as well, the Buddha as a physician. Number 1, the 4 Noble Truths are, the first one is that the diagnosis, there is suffering. The second, there is a cause of suffering. The third, that there is a cure that can stop the suffering. And the 4th Noble Truth is the treatment or the medicine, if you like. And the 4 Noble Truths were told, first of all, to those 5 disciples who had left him. If you remember from the first week on the Buddha's life story, they'd left him because they felt that he'd let them down by starting to eat and wash and all the normal things that they hadn't been doing, that ascetics hadn't been doing. Why are they called 4 Noble Truths? They're not called truths because you're expected to believe in them. They're known as truths because they are true whether you are a Buddhist or not, or believe it or not. The Buddha is saying, look, it is true that humans have dukkha. There is dukkha. This is a truth. And so if we accept that, and I think you'll be a very unusual and very fortunate human being if you've never had dukkha to any degree, ever. And if we can accept that one, then maybe we are prepared to have the confidence that the other 3 Noble Truths are truths. And another way to look at them is as something to experience. They offer an alternative way to the ordinary way that we categorize how we describe ourselves, how different ways of describing me and not me, and being alive and not being alive. Okay, so here is the first Noble Truth in more detail. And this I copied from the website I mentioned last time, Access to Insight. And I actually like this translation because it uses the word stressful and rather than suffering. Both are a translation from the word dukkha, which, if you recall, just means a wheel on a cart being a bit juddery. It's not running smoothly, but that it includes the whole range from a little to something that is really very, very, very difficult for us. But this uses the word stressful, which I think we're more familiar with, and it says birth is stressful, aging is stressful, death is stressful. And we don't have to be talking about physical birth and a physical death and a physical body aging. It does mean those things, But we can also be talking about a birth is something new happening, a new situation. The death can be the end of a situation. If we've been on holiday, for example, and we've come back and had to go back to work, then there's a death of the holiday period, isn't it? And that can be stressful for us. People get the holiday blues and things, don't they, from coming back to work. Aging, we're talking about aging bodies, but we can be talking about aging, an aging object, or a deterioration in something as it ages. And then he lists all the kind of emotions that we have: sorrow, sadness, lamentation. He mentions physical pain. He mentions distress. These are stressful. And then he says, association with what is not loved is stressful. And I put that in bold. I'll come back to that in a moment. Separation from what is loved is stressful. Not getting what is wanted is stressful. In short, the 5 clinging aggregates are stressful. Well, a few points here. First of all, the detail that's gone into as to what is stressful. It's not just, oh, it's stressful. He actually makes it very, very clear what is stressful, all the different things that are stressful. Why? Because it's important, if we're going to work with stress, that we know what it is, that we understand it. We're not turning away from it and distracting ourselves with something else. We're taking a look so that we know the stress. This might seem a bit strange that we're actually looking to know the stress, but we need to be able to know what it is. The other thing that's interesting is that he has brought in here now, this not loved is loved by this body. And finally, he says at the bottom, the 5 clinging aggregates are stressful. They are dukkha. He doesn't say the 5 aggregates. He says the 5 clinging aggregates, because we identify with them as me, as mine, as I. We're clinging to them. They are me. And he said that is dukkha. That is stressful. So, this last week we had this, and so these 5 skandhas we cling to, we think they are me, they are mine, they are I. And we looked at this last week, and let's just have another quick look. We've got the first 3 aggregates or skandhas, I think quite a little bit easier to understand, I think. So we know the body and the sense data that comes in to this body. And we said before, you know, this body is, I identify with this body. This is my body. This is my body. Is it? I can't decide how tall it is. I can't stop the hair growing, the nails growing. I can't stop it aging. But it's my body. Where is the locus of control? The sense data, constantly, different sights, different sounds, different tactile sensations. We've got the vajrayana, that's the immediate response to the incoming data and to the sense data. I'd like you to think about that again this week. Maybe out for a walk or something like that. It's surprising. You'll see things, notice things that that's either liked or not liked, or you're neutral about. Spend some time seeing if you can recognize them. Perceptions, if you remember, that's memory, it's our ability to label things, which is useful. It would make life very difficult if every time we came across an object, we couldn't remember what it was. So, but those perceptions, we're now getting into the realms of these changing over time. We said before about maybe, you used to like something that you don't like anymore. I'm not talking about like in the sense of Vedana. I'm talking about like in a sense as a perception. And then we have all the thought streams that we build up around things. And finally, we have consciousness. And I just want now to just have a look at this one, at consciousness. What is it? And last week I said that consciousness is what we're born with. It's with this life energy, and it is. But what are we conscious of? And let's look at how the Buddha actually explained it. The Buddha was very clear that there is no consciousness without a condition, without conditions. And the consciousness is named after the condition that it arises from. So let's have a little closer look at that. So, for example, here's a picture. It's a rat. The eye sees a rat. You'll see why I've chosen that picture later. The eye is the organ that is able to receive that information. And then it goes to the nervous system and we have sight, visual consciousness. If I went to the butcher's and asked if I could have some sheep's eyes, and I brought them home, I don't know why, but I brought them home, those eyes would not work, would they? They wouldn't be able to see anything. It's only when it's all part of the whole does it work. But if the eye works and it's in the body, then unless I close my eyes or turn away, I can't help but see whatever is coming in. Perhaps an easier example is looking at hearing. I need an ear, I need a sound, and then the two, if the ear functions properly, everything's working and it's in a living body, then we have auditory consciousness. I can close my eyes, so I always think the hearing is a better example. Can you choose not to hear? Can you choose what you hear? Who is doing the hearing? If you are asleep and your alarm goes off, you can still hear that alarm. Is this consciousness you as such? And perhaps the most difficult, so we've got all the five senses. We've got sight, sound, smell, touch. Have I got five? You know what they are anyway. And the last one in Buddhism, very interesting, very important, thought is the sixth sense. A thought is a thought. That's all it is. It's sensory information. And like all the other senses, it is responded to, it's detected and responded to. So we have a thought, we have a mind as the organ or brain, and then we have thought consciousness. And the Buddha said there are 6 types of consciousness. He said the analogy he used was like a fire. He said, I can have a wood fire, a coal fire, a straw fire. And so we have those 6 consciousnesses. The consciousnesses are not doing the labeling. The I sees something, it's perception that labels it. So if we go back to, so it's just saying that what I've just said, conscious does not recognize the object. This is done by the third skandha of perception. So if we go back to the diagram we had before, let's have a look at this in with an example. So we have the body and we have the sense data, and the other week I was stood at the kitchen sink washing up, and the light was just beginning to fade outside when I saw a rat in the garden. That was information that came in and was in the consciousness. Immediately there was oh no kind of feeling, or what's that kind of feeling, which often we can feel as something, a physical sensation, but it's a mental or physical sensation. Believe me, it was quite strong because I recognized it as a rat. I've seen pictures of rats. I've seen a rat before. I knew it was a rat, and there's other things that I believe about rats, a part of my perception, in that they're not nice, and that I'm a bit frightened of them. I don't want to come in close contact with them, and I don't want one in my garden. Well, that is taking us into all the thought streams that came up. Now, all these things are going into consciousness. In the mental formations, I begin to have some choices here, some intention, because immediately I start lots of thought streams, like I need a cat. Oh my God, if there's one, is there more rats in my garden? Can they get in the house? And all this is becoming all quite voluble for me in my consciousness. I am knowing these thought streams. I own them. They're not just a thought about a rat. I am those thought streams now. And I go and disturb other members of the household and tell them that they've got to come out and find this rat that's wandering around in my garden. So it affected what I did, affected my behaviour. And actually there, because I am those thought streams, that consciousness, I am that. That is what I am at that moment. But there is an ability that I could have just gone, phew, it's a rat. The Buddha likened this consciousness to a mountain river. He said it's impermanent. The 5 skandhas are all impermanent, constantly changing. And when they work together, in that combination, they produce that idea of an I. I am those thoughts. I was those thoughts about that rat. At that moment, that was what I was. And it is said, isn't it, that we, you can't step into the same river twice because the water's different and you are different. You can't step into the river twice. This I may well be an illusion or a delusion in that it's harmful for us. It causes us problems, rather. It causes problems. But it's very real. It's what we are working with. This is how it feels. and a delusion or not, it is very real for us. And so what we're going to start doing is just picking away at that a little bit, which we've already started to do. And just for a moment to think about, how separate are we really from other people? We're already looking at all the causes and conditions, and there are lots of connections between us and others, aren't there? For example, although it feels like we're in this body, me, mine, and I am not you, and you are not me, and I'm not that. But actually, we rely on others for food. Our mood can affect other people. Their moods can affect us. Those adverts, when they were talking about ventilation in COVID, you know, how showing how we affect the air that is being breathed out and breathed in by other people. And the connections are very profound. So just to repeat that, although I, as me, mine, I, might be a delusion, it is actually what we work with in the Buddhist practice, and that it is necessary to understand stress. This delusion of a permanent and separate I causes dukkha, is dukkha. And it generates the three poisons or fires, and we referred to these last week: greed, hatred, and delusion. We're going to talk a lot more about the three fires in a later lesson. So the second noble truth. And again, this is a translation from Access to Insight. This, O monks, is the truth of the arising of suffering. This is how suffering starts. It is the thirst or craving which gives rise to rebirth, to suffering, to dukkha, which is bound up with passionate delight, which seeks fresh pleasure, now here, now there, in the form of thirst for sensual pleasure, thirst for existence, thirst for non-existence. Thirst, tanna, is the word that thirst is translated from, and it means a very strong wanting. Okay, imagine how driven we are by thirst. And he said it's this thirst or craving that causes new situations, new things to arise, because all the time it's bound up with delight, wanting things that we like. And he said three kinds of craving. Let's have a look at them. He said three types of craving or wanting. Thirst for three types of things. First of all, sensual things, physical things, material things. Okay, material things. We like fine wine dining, nice clothes, nice cars. We like shopping, retail therapy. We live in a culture very much that encourages this. And let's make it clear, Buddhism is not saying do not have these things. It is not saying that at all. However, what it is saying is enjoy them, but they're impermanent. You might get where you can't afford these things, or don't cling to them. Don't identify with them. When they're not there, we have dukkha. These things cause dukkha when we can't have them. We have a craving for them. We want them. And it's not just material things, is it? We have a craving for, we want to be loved. We want rewards. We want friends. We want promotion at work. We want people to tell us how good we are. We want praise. They are absolutely fine. but don't attach to them. You know, performance reviews at work, performance management, you know, are all the thing now, aren't they? And, you know, you could get a wonderful one from your line manager that says how fantastic you are. It's all there on paper. You're absolutely thrilled to bits. Why not be? Take the joy whilst it's there. But then maybe you fall out with your line manager and the next review you get isn't very nice, or you've got a new line manager, and then you go right down. And it's just asking you to be aware of how these things cause us dukkha, and to put them basically into perspective. That is a thirst. I am. These make me feel good. But then we have a more difficult one perhaps to understand, for a thirst not to exist. We might be in a situation that we really don't like and we want to get out of. So this is the thirst for not liking something, for not wanting, for non-existence. And we might be embarrassed about something, or it could be, you know, a really difficult situation, or we could be quite depressed. And obviously this craving for non-existence can lead to self-harm. And we're being asked to be aware of these things, have this awareness. Certain emotions will cause dukkha, and we might want to get rid of them. And because we think we ought to feel, we shouldn't have stress, we should be nice and calm, cool and collected. And that may well be that thirst, that wanting, but we need to work with that stress. So to sum up, not to have what is liked is stressful. Not to have what you want. You can't always have what you want. To have what is not liked is stressful. To part from what is liked is stressful. To be together with what is not liked is stressful, is dukkha. The third noble truth. This is the stopping, this is the cure. The Buddha said, "This, O monks, is the truth of the cessation of suffering. It is the utter cessation of that craving, the withdrawing from it, the renouncing of it, the rejection of it, liberation from it, and non-attachment to it. The problem," he said, "is the thirst, is the craving, is the wanting." Craving can be for something, or it can be a pushing away. It's the same thing. Liking and not liking, it's coming from the same thing, isn't it? So we have to look at the wanting, we have to look at the craving. And finally, the treatment. And this is the fourth noble truth. And this is called the Noble Eightfold Path. And I've got them displayed there in two ways. I've got them displayed as a list, 8 things. This is the treatment. I've got them as they're often displayed as a wheel. And there is a reason for displaying them as that wheel. However, I want to stop there. I don't want to talk about the Noble Eightfold Path. That's a lesson in itself. And in fact, it's next week's lesson. And very, very quickly, I just wanted to tell a story. And it's a very, very well-known Buddhist story. It's Kisa Gautama and the mustard seeds. And you may well be familiar with this. It's very famous. And I wanted to well, let me tell it, and then I'll say why I particularly wanted to end with this. So Kisa is a young woman from a very wealthy family, very happily married to an important merchant. However, her husband dies, so she's unfortunately widowed, quite young, and then they have a son who, when he was about a year old, shortly after the death of her husband, her son falls ill and dies. Their only child dies. So 1 minute she's got a lot, wealth, husband, child, and then she's ended up without husband and child. She's absolutely beside herself. She's distraught. And at the death of the baby, and she walks around holding the baby. She will not put the baby down. And she's going from house to house with this dead baby, begging everybody to help her and bring her son back to life. And like as I say, she would not put the child down. And of course, nobody could help her. But somebody suggested that she went to see the Buddha himself, which she did. And she carried the dead child to the Buddha and told him her story and asked him to bring her child back to life. And he explained to her that, he tried to explain to her that she couldn't do that. It wasn't within his power to bring a dead child back to life. But actually, she was too upset. She couldn't hear him. So he realized that he needed to help her to understand this herself. So he said to her, okay, I'll see if I can help you. I might be able to solve your problem. I want you to go and get me 4 or 5 mustard seeds from 5 different houses. But the seeds must only come from a house where there has been no death. So off she sets off, filled with hope. And she knocks on 5 different doors. On each occasion, they're quite happy to give her a mustard seed. But on every occasion, there's been a death in that house. So she has to go back to the Buddha, and she realizes that what he was saying to her was that this suffering was not just hers. So the story is not only a reminder about death touching all of us, which is an important message. We had it at the very beginning. But it's about any problems that we have, that sometimes this suffering is universal. And I particularly wanted to tell this story at the end here now, because I think sometimes some of this can all sound rather clinical. And actually, Buddhism isn't. It's asking us to develop wisdom and compassion, not just for other people, but also for ourselves. And there might be something else that we can't lay down and is causing us this suffering. And we need to be able to look at that. Okay, so we'll leave it there. So I don't know if there are any questions to put in the chat, or anybody wants to raise a hand. I've got so one question said, from Melissa, will we touch upon dependent arising? Just learning about this. Yes, we will be. So when we are doing the lesson on the wheel of life, which without looking back, I'm not quite sure which one that is, but we will be looking at dependent arising, yes. And the next question said, I would like to ask, this is from Abby, I'd like to ask about the interrelation of non-attachment and effort. Some things in life do take effort, willpower to achieve. Or the relationship between Buddhism and passivity. Okay, that's an interesting question, because actually I did mean to mention willpower and didn't. These things cannot be done by sheer will. It's a change in attitude. It does not work saying, I will, or I won't, because that's an I thing, and it doesn't work. There is effort. I think in the Noble Eightfold Path, one of the strands there is right effort. So yes, we do make effort, but it's not effort like that kind of effort. Any other questions? You can raise your hand if you wish. So Abby and Melissa, I hope I answered those for you. Anybody else? No? Okay. So I hope you'll join us next week. And so we are again carrying on with the armchair activity. And remember, 5 or 6 days of the week, set the time in advance. What I'm asking you not to do is to think, oh, I've got a minute. Oh, I've got 10 minutes. I think I'll do the armchair activity. I want it pre-planned. There is a reason for that. So decide it yourself. Try and make it the same time every day. So if you're going to make it 3 o'clock in the afternoon, can you stick to that? There is a method here. Focus on what's coming into consciousness. What's in consciousness is not always in our attention. We don't always notice. It's not always noticed. Maybe notice the liking and the not liking. It's before words. It's not a verbal thinking that we're looking for. Okay, thank you very much, Valerio. And hopefully I will see you next week. Okay, good night.